The bright morning lights of the Lorraine Kelly show gleamed off the polished set as cameras began rolling, and the crew prepared for what they thought would be an amusing and light-hearted interview. Rowan Atkinson, the man synonymous with subtle comedy and expressive silence, was today's guest, there to promote his new series exploring the modern pressures of humor in a politically sensitive world. Lorraine had always admired his career, describing him as a genius of restraint and timing. But no one in that studio expected that this very restraint would unravel into one of the most unexpected and tense moments ever seen on her show. Rowan arrived at the studio earlier than scheduled, polite as always but noticeably distant. His assistant quietly mentioned that he wasn't in the best of moods, having faced several harsh criticisms about his comments on comedy and cancel culture in recent interviews. Lorraine's producers knew this but believed her warmth could ease any discomfort. As the cameras went live and the opening music faded, Lorraine greeted him with her usual cheer. "Rowan, it's such a treat to have you here," she began, smiling brightly. He returned a small nod, his face neutral, hands folded neatly on his lap. "Thank you," he said softly, "though I'm not sure everyone's as happy to see me lately." The audience chuckled, sensing his tone was dry humor. Lorraine laughed politely, taking the cue to keep things light. She started by discussing his career, his beloved characters, and how Mr. Bean had become a universal symbol of silent comedy. Rowan responded thoughtfully, explaining how physical humor could unite people without words. The atmosphere was calm, even nostalgic, until Lorraine, reading from her notes, decided to touch upon a subject that producers hoped would add depth. "You've said before that comedy is under threat from political correctness," she said carefully. "Do you still feel that way?" Rowan paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I don't feel that way," he replied slowly. "I know it." The audience laughed nervously again, unsure if he was joking. Lorraine smiled. "I think most people agree you've always pushed boundaries in the right way," she said, "but do you think perhaps some of the old jokes wouldn't work today?" Rowan shifted in his chair, his usual composure taking on a colder edge. "That's the problem, Lorraine," he said. "We're not even allowed to test what works anymore without someone getting offended on behalf of everyone else." His tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Lorraine nodded, trying to balance diplomacy and curiosity. "I understand," she said gently, "but isn't there some good in being more sensitive?" Rowan's eyes lifted from the table, locking with hers. "Sensitivity is one thing," he said, "but censorship disguised as kindness is another." The studio grew quieter. Lorraine pressed on, her tone still kind but probing. "Some people would say that comedians have a responsibility not to punch down," she offered. Rowan gave a small, humorless smile. "That phrase," he said, "has become a muzzle. Comedy's not about punching up or down, it's about truth. If truth makes you uncomfortable, maybe the problem isn't the comedian." The audience murmured faintly. Lorraine tried to ease the tension with a soft laugh. "Well, you're certainly not afraid to say what you think," she said. "I shouldn't have to be afraid," he replied quickly, his voice rising just a fraction. "That's the point. Fear shouldn't be part of creativity." Lorraine blinked, momentarily surprised by his intensity. "Of course," she said, "but don't you think times have changed? Audiences expect empathy now." Rowan leaned slightly forward. "Empathy has been turned into a weapon, Lorraine. It's no longer about understanding, it's about control." The mood in the room changed sharply. The studio audience, who'd come expecting light banter and laughter, now sat stiffly, watching the tension unfold live before their eyes. Sensing the change, Lorraine tried to bring the tone back. "I think people just want comedy that doesn't hurt anyone," she said softly. Rowan's brows furrowed. "Comedy that doesn't hurt anyone," he repeated slowly. "That's not comedy, that's comfort. And comfort never changes anything." Lorraine hesitated. "So you believe offense is necessary?" she asked. He nodded firmly. "I believe discomfort is necessary. Offense is simply someone's reaction to facing it." The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and unfiltered. The control room, realizing this had gone beyond normal morning conversation, signaled Lorraine to steer the topic away. "Let's talk about your new series," she said, her voice lighter now. "It seems you're exploring these very themes, how humor adapts to the times." Rowan's expression softened slightly but only for a moment. "The series isn't about adapting," he corrected. "It's about surviving." Lorraine's smile faltered. "That's a strong word," she said, "surviving?" He nodded. "Yes. You see, Lorraine, every comedian today has to navigate a minefield of outrage. One misplaced joke, one misunderstood line, and you're done. Careers don't end from failure anymore, they end from interpretation." Lorraine leaned in slightly. "But surely that's part of growing as artists, isn't it? Evolving with society?" she asked. Rowan's tone turned colder. "No," he said, "that's part of surrendering to it." A sharp silence followed. Lorraine smiled politely, though her discomfort was visible now. "I think we'll have to agree to disagree," she said. Rowan tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "That's the polite way of saying you don't understand," he said quietly. Lorraine blinked, taken aback. "I beg your pardon?" she asked. "You heard me," Rowan replied. His voice was calm, but his words sliced through the air. The audience gasped softly. Lorraine regained her composure quickly, saying with a careful smile, "I do understand, Rowan. I just think humor and kindness can coexist." He shook his head. "Not when kindness becomes censorship," he replied. The control room decided enough was enough and cut to a short video clip of his show, but Rowan refused to stay silent. Even as the clip played, his microphone still caught him muttering, "This is exactly what's wrong, everyone wants to edit instead of listen." Lorraine's face tightened, but she stayed professional as the cameras came back to her. "That's certainly a passionate view," she said. Rowan sighed deeply. "It's not passion," he said. "It's exhaustion. I'm tired of pretending civility is the same as honesty." Lorraine's tone stayed soft, though the tension was visible in her eyes. "Well, honesty has certainly brought us an interesting discussion," she said, trying to end on a light note. Rowan leaned back and said, "You call it interesting. I call it proof." The producers were whispering urgently now, instructing Lorraine to close the segment. She smiled tightly, saying, "Rowan Atkinson, everyone. His new series airs this weekend," but she was interrupted when he stood up abruptly. "Actually," he said, removing his microphone, "I think I'll pass on promoting it here." Lorraine blinked, startled. "Rowan, please, there's no need," but he shook his head, his expression unreadable. "No hard feelings, Lorraine," he said quietly, "but I'm not here to make small talk about censorship while it happens in real time." With that, he turned and began walking off the set. The audience gasped, a few applauding awkwardly, unsure whether it was part of the act. Lorraine stayed seated, stunned but still smiling as the cameras followed him briefly before cutting to the show's logo. When the program returned from commercial, Lorraine composed herself and addressed the audience with professionalism that only years of experience could provide. "Well," she said lightly, "that was unexpected. Rowan is, as we all know, one of our greatest talents, and passionate conversations are part of live television." The audience clapped hesitantly, and the show moved on. But online, the storm had already begun. Within minutes, social media was ablaze with clips of the clash, headlines reading, "Rowan Atkinson walks out on Lorraine," spreading across platforms. By midday, the entire nation was talking. Some called Rowan brave for standing his ground, others accused him of arrogance. Lorraine supporters praised her for remaining calm under fire, while critics debated whether she'd provoked him with questions about cancel culture. Networks replayed the footage on loops, commentators dissected every phrase, and within hours, the clip had become the most watched moment of the week. Even comedians weighed in, half siding with Rowan's frustration, half urging compassion over confrontation. That evening, Lorraine's production team released a short statement thanking Rowan for appearing and calling the exchange a passionate discussion about comedy and freedom. Rowan, me.